Summary. The group moves on to the next terrifying area while Artificer showcases her abilities. Chapter 16, Memory Crypts. Survivor awoke to the sound of footsteps. Cracking an eye open, he saw Artificer standing by the shelter door, already ready to leave. Listening closely, he came to the conclusion that the rain had stopped, meaning the shelter would open soon. She stood ramrod straight, twirling her explosive spear in one paw and her lantern in the other. The drone that seemed to follow her everywhere hovered next to her, also looking towards the shelter door. The maroon slugcat seemed incredibly impatient. Maybe she didn't get much sleep? He scanned her body for signs of fatigue, but she seemed well rested enough. In fact, she seemed jittery, almost excited to get out of the shelter. Survivor often felt the opposite, enjoying the quiet of the shelters as a chance to get a rest from the world outside. Still, her being well rested didn't explain her urgency to get going, especially since the shelter hadn't even opened yet. "Good morning." She jumped at the sudden noise but didn't turn around. "Not a big fan of sleeping in, I take it?" he asked tiredly. "Why waste time sleeping when you could be out there killing scavs instead?" She responded after a while, her voice low and dripping with venom, before chuckling slightly to herself. He raised his eyebrow. Was killing hapless scavengers all she cared about? Since he had no worthwhile response to her statement, he instead focused on waking up his other traveling companions. Starting with Glimmer, he gently shook the small mouse awake. It squeaked with surprise before remembering what happened last cycle, nuzzling up to Survivor and chirping happily. "Time to get going, Glimmer," he said, patting the mouse on its head. It squeaked in response, getting to its feet. It walked over to the shelter exit, nervously glancing at Artificer, who ignored the fearful gaze of the small creature. "That's one, now for the other," Survivor thought as he reached over and slightly pushed Hunter's shoulder. After being nudged, the red slugcat groaned and opened his eyes. He tried to stretch, only to hiss in pain, causing Artificer to glance over. "Careful," Survivor said, helping his mate sit up. He looked paler than he had last cycle, trembling slightly and coughing from time to time. The shelter doors whirred to life, slowly opening up. Glimmer looked to Artificer, who gestured for the tiny creature to go through. It squeaked in understanding, climbing through the pipe. Artificer seemed ready to go but waited at the entrance, tapping the floor with her spear impatiently. "I'm fine," Hunter eventually said, coughing a few more times. "I'll be fine once I get something to eat," he clarified, wincing slightly. "It's always worse at the start of the cycle, just give me a minute." Artificer scoffed in response, looking at Hunter with a mocking grin. "Yes, by all means, waste half our cycle, why don't you?" She said it sarcastically. Hunter huffed angrily, got to his feet quickly, albeit with some help from Survivor, and stared Artificer down. Well, that got him moving quick. Survivor thought as he gently removed his paws, allowing Hunter to stand on his own. "I said I'm fine," he said, puffing out his chest and straightening his back. Artificer gave him an unimpressed stare, but snickered and flashed a smirk after a while, seemingly amused. "After you, then," she said, gesturing to the open shelter doors. Hunter growled, picked the remaining lantern off the floor, walked up to the exit with determined steps, and slid through the pipe. Survivor glanced at Artificer, still standing to the side of the exit pipe, chuckling to herself. Seeing Survivor staring, she tilts her head to the side questioningly. "Did you know he would react that way?" he asked, grinning slightly. With another snicker, Artificer responds with a shrug before winking her one good eye. He rolled his eyes lightheartedly at her before sliding through the pipe. On the other side, he first laid his eyes on Glimmer, looking back at the pipe, waiting. Upon spotting him, the little creature squeaked happily, moving over and clambering up his leg and torso before settling on his right shoulder. Survivor reached over and scratched the little one behind the ear. It chirped in response. Looking back, he saw Hunter glancing around the terrain, still shivering slightly but holding up well otherwise. It seemed Artificer's little trick worked wonders at getting him moving. Teasing works really well on Hunter, making a note of that. Survivor thought, mischievously smiling to himself. He did not like the way his mate was shivering, however, so he walked over to his side and wrapped him in a side hug. Hunter stilled for a moment before melting into the physical contact, rumbling loudly. Artificer passed through behind them, taking a glance around the dark surroundings. After a moment, she nodded to herself, turned to the other slug cats, and pointed to a tunnel with her spear. "Through here," she said, making sure the slug cats had seen where she was pointing before trekking towards the pipe. The overseer popped up as well, pointing in the same direction, as if it were confirming Artificer's path. They kept following Artificer's and the overseer's guidance, moving through rooms that held the same weird kelp Hunter and Survivor had seen temporarily in Shoreline. Artificer took to calling it monster kelp, showing them it was easy to just sneak past as it was blind and relied on sound. If that didn't work, it could always be stunned by a rock or spear. After a while of this, Artificer suddenly stopped in front of a pipe, turning around to look at the rest of the group. "Through here, this path gets dangerous. I have traveled through this next area a couple times before, but no further than that," she explained. "Once while exploring, and another time while showing your brother the way to this 5 rock guy." 5 pebbles, Hunter corrected, leaning on a nearby wall. Artificer looked over at him and snarled, to which Hunter smiled smugly. "Whatever. The point is that this next area is incredibly dangerous. But I have been through here before," she hummed, walking towards the pipe. "Follow me, and I'll explain." Artificer passed through the pipe, and Hunter sighed and got off the wall. "Who made her the leader?" he grumbled, glancing at Survivor, who shrugged in response. "I guess she just took that role." Survivor responded, looking thoughtful. "She is the oldest of us, so it would make sense that she take the role, having the most experience and all." Hunter huffed, walking up to the pipe. "Well, I still don't like it," Hunter muttered as he crawled off. Survivor sighed. This was going to be a doozy. Glimmer squeaked fearfully, so he reached up and reassured her with some ear scratches while passing through the pipe. Exiting the pipe, Artificer grimaced as she was faced with the familiar green lightning in the distance. "Back in this place again," she thought as she listened for the loud, rhythmic, clanking sounds of those ugly, biomechanical birds. Hearing nothing, she sighed in relief. Maybe the trip through this hellscape will be easier this time. She still remembered traveling through here with Survivor's brother, whose name still escaped her, when he'd been trying to tame the birds. She doesn't know how any sane slugcat could lay eyes on such an abomination and think, "Yeah, I can fix them." But he sure did. She laughed to herself. He was a pretty fun traveling companion, all things considered. If only because he was pretty weird but ultimately harmless. I hope the poor pup made it to his destination once he was left alone. She frowned at the thought, shaking it out of her head. He wasn't a pup, he was a young adult, just barely grown out of being a slug pup. That doesn't make it any better. Artificer growled at her own thoughts, shaking her head again. Enough of this. In the end, she didn't care what happened to him. She had no attachment to the young slug cat, none at all. With another sigh, she looked out at the landscape ahead of her. Incredible darkness, sometimes lit up by green flashes of light. No birds are in sight, at least not yet. She startled slightly when the other 2 slug cats walked up on her right, having almost forgotten they were with her. "Monk went through here," Survivor shouted after a short moment of silence. "Ah yes, that was his name, Monk," Artificer thought, satisfied at finally having been reminded. It was a very fitting name for the little pacifist, she supposed. Artificer glanced at the other slug cats. Survivor was staring straight ahead, seeming incredibly shocked at the prospect of his little brother going through this place, flinching slightly at the rumbling of thunder. Hunter seemed more stoic, but maybe that was just his sickly tiredness speaking for him. He had a comforting arm around Survivor, looking out at the landscape. That's when she heard it, the clanking sounds in the distance, drawing closer. The other slug cats heard it as well, tensing and looking around nervously. Glimmer nuzzled into Survivor's neck, squealing in fear. "Ah, there are the birds," Artificer thought, sighing to herself. Why was it never just easy and straightforward? The sounds got louder and louder, eventually reaching a crescendo as the black-feathered, tall, biomechanical birds ran past. Their scissor-like beaks snapped madly in the air, making distinct snipping sounds as they opened and closed rapidly. The lower parts of their legs were comprised of stilt-like prosthetics, extending and retracting as they ran, at times emitting sparks. At least they aren't stealthy and silent. Artificer thought they would have been way scarier if that were the case. Survivor froze in terror while Hunter pulled the explosive spear off his back and took a protective step in front of the white slugcat. Artificer just stared. She had seen these birds many times before. They were kind of scary the very first time, but the novelty quickly wore off. After at least 5 of the birds had run by, no more came, the loud metallic clang slowly but surely fading out as the creatures kept running with no clear direction. The 2 slugcats next to her sagged in relief as Hunter put the explosive spear on his back. "Right, let's get going then," Artificer said, striding forward. "There's no point in wasting more time than they already have, after all. Are we sure they've all run past?" Survivor asked, fear clear in his voice, as he took Hunter's paw in his. Despite his uncertainty, he moved to catch up to Artificer, with Hunter following close behind, looking around nervously. "Oh, more will come running shortly," she chirped nonchalantly as she walked past the first tunnel in the ground, stopping in front of a tall wall and looking up. Survivor and Glimmer whimpered in fear, while Hunter growled, once again taking out his explosive spear. "What the hell are those things?" the red slugcat asked, angrily gritting his teeth and protectively pulling Survivor closer to himself. "Who knows? Who cares?" Artificer responds. "Listen up, we'll do the same thing me and Monk did when I helped him through here." She points to the top of the wall in front of them. "I'll stay on the high ground, keeping watch to make sure you guys, who are moving from tunnel to tunnel, don't get caught out in the open by the birds." The other 2 slugcats nod, Hunter picking a spear off the ground. "If you're going to climb that, you need this," he says, holding the spear out for her to take. Artificer tilts her head in confusion. "Why would I need another spear? I already have one." She lifts the explosive spear in her paw, showing it off to Hunter, who grunts in frustration. "I see that. But you can't lodge that spear in the wall, unless you want to blow yourself up." Artificer scowls, opening her mouth to argue back, until she realizes something. "Oh, that's right. They don't know about," she smirks, twirling the spear in her paw as she walks closer to the wall. Hunter and Survivor share a confused glance. "I don't need spears for this tiny jump," she says confidently before backflipping upwards and letting off an explosion mid-air, which propels her on top of the wall. Artificer looks down, laughing at the shocked reactions of the others. Even Glimmer looked confused as to how she performed such a tall jump. After getting over the shock, Survivor claps excitedly, cheering. Hunter, meanwhile, sputters confusedly for a moment. "How did you even do that?" he eventually yells, gesturing with his arms towards the height of the wall. "Wouldn't you like to know?" She responds mischievously, snickering at Hunter's pouty expression while Survivor giggles at the situation. "Okay, let's just keep moving," Hunter eventually says in frustration. He grabs onto Survivor, pulling him towards the nearest tunnel. Glimmer jumps off his shoulder with a squeak and heads into the tunnels first. Before going through the tunnel, Hunter stops and points upward toward Artificer. "You better watch our backs properly, you hear?" he shouts before crawling down into the tunnel, Survivor stopping to wave at her before following close behind. She straightens up, scanning the landscape as the others crawl through the tunnels. So far, so good. The spot she was sitting at was alright. It could be higher up so she could see more of the landscape, but beggars can't be choosers. After a moment, she heard shuffling behind her. Turning around, she sees Glimmer crawl out of the tunnel's other side before turning around and chirping into the tunnel. Next, Hunter crawls out, quickly turning around and helping Survivor out of the pipe. "Good. Now run to the next one, it's all clear," she shouts down at them. Survivor flashes her a thumbs up, picks up Glimmer, grabs hold of Hunter's paw, and starts moving forward. Hunter sends her a glare as he's led away, and she responds by sticking her tongue out at him before following the others by jumping across the platforms above. The gaps between the jumps are wide. Any regular slugcat without her explosive abilities would not have been able to make them. The strategy holds up as the gang manages to make safe progress through the region. Artificer's high locations allow her the luxury of seeing the birds approaching long before they become an issue. Thus, she can tell when they all have time to move safely and when she should jump into the tunnels with the others and hide. The other two slugcats asked her about the glowing, blue, circle-shaped objects hanging from stalks around the region, but she hadn't really been interested in interacting with them much, and so she had no real answer for what they were. Hunter decided to pluck one and take it with him anyway, for some odd reason. When they were about halfway through the region, Artificer saw something while scanning the terrain that surprised her. A single one of the birds was sprinting over the field, completely on its own. Had it been separated? She had only ever encountered the birds in groups. Nevertheless, she suddenly got an urge to try bird meat. They hadn't encountered any scavengers after all, and she was hungry. Glancing behind her at the rest of the group, who were currently climbing out of another tunnel, she could tell they were hungry as well. Besides, Hunter did say the symptoms of his apparent illness got better after he ate, so why not fix that problem? Hey, something's wrong? Survivor suddenly shouted from below, looking up at her in concern. A lone bird is approaching. She called back, twirling her spear and smirking. I'm gonna kill it. Survivor and Hunter looked shocked at this, and Hunter stepped forward with a scowl on his face. Don't waste the explosive spear. Just get down here, and let's let it pass. He said that, waving her over. Survivor nodded along to Hunter's words, looking at her worriedly. You're hungry, aren't you? Artificer asked, turning back towards the bird. It would almost be upon her. The birds are half machines, but there should be some good flesh on its bones. She crouched down into a combat stance as the bird spotted her, running over. Artificer, please, come down. Survivor yelled behind her, out of sight. It's not safe. She opted to ignore the yelling in favor of taking down her opponent. As the bird got close, she stepped backwards until she teetered on the edge of her platform, the other slugcats behind her still yelling. Come on, dumbass. Come get me. She screamed, laughing as the bird reached down to try to snatch her up with its beak. She hopped back, avoiding the bird's bite, and threw her spear right into its throat, where it lodged in its flesh. Landing on the ground with a roll, she looked up at the bird, which seemed fairly angry with her. With a metallic shriek, it tried to lean down and bite her again. It was either ignoring or not noticing the audible hiss of a fuse burning down, coming from the spear still lodged inside it. Artificer vaguely heard Survivor and Hunter yell something behind her as she laughed mockingly at the dangerous predator, holding her arms out to her sides. According to my counting, this dumbass bird should die right about. With a great boom, the spear exploded, effectively decapitating the creature and launching its head into the air. Its body crumpled to the ground, narrowly missing Artificer. She only just heard the other slugcat say something over the loud ringing in her ears. Now, when the ringing in her ears finally settled down to its usual amount, she turned around. Hunter was looking at her with a very angry expression, while Survivor was trying to clear his left ear with one of his claws. Glimmer was standing on the ground next to his owner, looking dizzy and dazed. What the hell is wrong with you? Hunter screamed, stepping forward and jabbing a finger into her chest. You want us to go deaf? Artificer hummed. She did always forget just how loud the explosions were to those not used to them. The ringing in your ears should go away shortly. Artificer responded, ignoring Survivor's confused shout of should. Anyways, I got us food. You should be more grateful. She said this, turning around and kneeling down in front of the corpse. You. She could practically hear Hunter shaking with rage behind her, too angry to even formulate proper sentences. Eventually, she heard him take a deep breath, calming down slightly. Ah, whatever. He mumbled, sitting down next to her. They ate until they felt full, the meat being tough but rather filling. There was still plenty left for Survivor, who seemed to have fully recovered from the loud explosion. There's still plenty of meat left, Survivor, Artificer said, gesturing to the dead bird. Ah, I can't eat that. The meat is too tough for my teeth. he explained, wincing slightly. Sorry. Oh, that seems like another trait the two brothers shared, then. Artificer had been rather confused when she tried to offer to hunt something for Monk to eat, and he'd explained he wouldn't be able to chew most meats. Unlike Hunter and her, who sported sharp, serrated teeth, Monk and Survivor had more dull teeth that couldn't tear through meat as efficiently. Though, if she remembered correctly, there was a tunnel full of centipedes just ahead. No worries. There are centipedes on the way. They should work better, she explained, licking some of the bird's blood from her paws. Survivor perked up at that. That'll work. He said this, smiling gratefully. We should find something for Glimmer too, Survivor added, leaning down to pet the mouse as it chittered happily. Yes, it'll be fine. But for now, we need to keep moving, Hunter said, looking a bit more energetic now that he'd been fed. I still think it was a waste of an explosive spear, he added, looking at Artificer with a scowl. She barked a laugh, which surprised him. You think so? Artificer asked, laughing at Hunter's baffled expression. Here, lend me your spear, she said, reaching out for the regular spear he held in his paw. He looked a bit torn on whether he should give it to her, clutching it protectively close to himself, but Survivor gave him a comforting pat on the shoulder, and he handed it over with a sigh, pouting slightly. Explosive jumping is far from my only trick, she said, bringing the tip of the spear to her mouth. Putting it in her mouth, she covers it in her explosive saliva, eventually pulling it out, the tip of the spear now covered in a red, sizzling substance. Wow, Survivor said, staring in awe at the creation of an explosive spear. Hunter just looks baffled that she has another odd ability involving explosions up her sleeve. How many explosion-related abilities do you have? He shouted as Artificer walked past him, laughing. Next, you'll tell us you can explode on command or something, Hunter added as he and Survivor caught up to her, following closely behind. Survivor giggled, and Glimmer seemed to also be chirping amusingly. He sighed. No more surprise abilities, please? No promises, Artificer responded, laughing again as Hunter groaned in frustration.